It had been 8 years since I left Hollow Creek. The town's edges had grown even more dilapidated, the streets long since claimed by vines and dirt, a heavy silence hanging in the air like a blanket. A place forgotten by time. My tires crunched over the gravel as I drove through, memories from a time I tried to bury clawing their way back into my mind. The dark stretch of the road that led into town felt like a tunnel, one I had entered countless times before, but now, it felt suffocating. I should have kept going, but I didn't. I couldn't. Hollow Creek wasn't just my hometown, it was where I'd witnessed something that had scarred me in ways words could never explain. It was a place I should have forgotten, but it wasn't finished with me. It had never been. It had been years, and I still couldn't shake the images that tormented me in my dreams. I should have moved on, maybe found a therapist, but even in my quietest moments, I could feel it, the pull. Hollow Creek was still inside me. I needed to see it again. I needed to confront the thing that had taken so much from me. I pulled into the abandoned parking lot of the old diner, its windows grimy and its sign half-lit. The place where I'd spent my childhood, sitting at the counter, pretending everything was fine. Pretending I didn't know what was going on in the woods behind the town. That's where it all started. I parked my car and sat there for a long moment, the engine's hum fading into the oppressive silence. My heart thudded in my chest, a slow, deliberate beat. Even now, after all these years, I could feel its weight, the terror of that time, the realization of what had really been happening beneath the surface. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from Sarah. "You sure about this? You can't go back there. It'll only make it worse." I didn't respond. How could I explain to her? Sarah didn't know. She couldn't. She hadn't seen what I had. I couldn't even put it into words for myself. How do you explain to someone that a place you once called home is haunted, not by ghosts or spirits, but by something far worse? Something real, flesh and blood, lurking just out of sight. Even now, my skin crawled at the memory. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, the chill air biting at my skin. The once bright yellow of the diner's sign now flickered erratically, casting an eerie glow over the empty street. The town hadn't changed much on the surface, just as rundown and abandoned as I remembered, but there was something more unsettling about it now. It was as if the town was holding its breath, waiting for something. Or someone. My boots thudded against the cracked pavement as I walked toward the diner's door. The hinges creaked as I pushed it open, the familiar scent of stale coffee and grease filling the air. It was almost like stepping back into a memory, but it was wrong, distorted. The tables were all empty, the chairs overturned. The place was a ghost of what it had been. There was a strange sense of stillness that made it feel more alive than it should have. I walked over to the counter, my fingers grazing the smooth, worn surface. The stool I used to sit in was still there, the same one I always claimed as my own. I had spent countless hours here with my friends, with my father. Hell, even after what happened, I still came back for a while. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping the town would give me answers. Maybe I thought I could find some kind of closure. I stayed longer than I should have. Then, a voice. Thought I might find you here. I turned, the blood draining from my face. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the fading light, was a figure I hadn't seen in years. Jason. I felt a jolt of panic in my chest. Jason was the last person I ever expected to see again in this place. The last person I wanted to see. He'd left this town 2 years ago, just like me, but unlike me, he hadn't looked back. He'd made his escape, and I assumed that was the end of it. I'd never heard from him again, but now here he was. And his expression. It was a mix of dread and something worse. Something that told me he knew the truth about this place. "You shouldn't be here," Jason said, his voice low, almost a whisper. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to meet his gaze. I had to come back. There's something I need to figure out. Jason shook his head slowly, as though he'd seen this before, as though he knew exactly where this would lead. "You can't figure it out, man. Not anymore. It's too late. We never should have come back." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean? What are you talking about? You haven't heard. You don't know. Jason's voice trembled. He glanced nervously over his shoulder, like he expected someone, or something, to be listening. My heart skipped a beat, a feeling of unease washing over me. I suddenly felt like I wasn't alone in the room. Like someone was watching us. Jason, tell me, I demanded, my voice desperate. What happened here? What happened to us? Jason opened his mouth to speak, but his words died in his throat when he heard it, a sound I knew all too well. A low, guttural growl. It wasn't the kind of sound you hear from any animal. No. This was something different. Jason froze. His eyes grew wide, and before I could move, he grabbed me by the arm and yanked me toward the back exit. We need to go. Now. But as we reached the door, it slammed shut with a deafening thud. My heart was racing, pounding in my ears as Jason and I struggled to open the door. The growl came again, louder this time. And then, a voice, a whisper from somewhere in the shadows of the diner. Don't leave. I spun around, panic rising in my throat. But there was no one there. The whisper came again. You shouldn't have come back. You shouldn't have come at all. The growl was louder now, and I could feel its presence behind me. Something was closing in. Something was waiting. Jason's face turned pale, and he stepped back. It's here. It never left. Jason's grip tightened on my arm as we backed away from the door, the growl growing more distinct, more tangible. My body was stiff with fear, but my mind was racing, trying to process what was happening. What had happened to us? What had happened to Hollow Creek? I looked at Jason, his face pale, his breath shallow. What is that sound? What is it? Jason didn't respond immediately. Instead, he was staring at the door, eyes wide, pupils darting. I knew he was searching for an escape, a way out, but I could feel it too, that presence, lurking just beyond the walls. Waiting. Watching. And the whisper, a voice like cold steel scraping against bone, continued to murmur from the shadows. Don't leave us. It was a voice I hadn't heard in years, and it sent a shiver down my spine. A voice I never wanted to hear again. The voice of it. The thing that had haunted this town, lurking just beneath the surface, feeding on the dark, on the fear, on the terror of people who dared to live here. It's back, Jason whispered hoarsely. It never left. I tried to speak, but my throat felt tight, constricted. I couldn't breathe properly, and every instinct in my body screamed for me to run, to escape. But there was nowhere to go. We were trapped. The diner was the only structure for miles in any direction. Outside, the streetlights flickered erratically, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance and twist, as though something invisible was moving through them. The growl rumbled again, much closer now, and the door groaned under an unseen weight. The thing behind it was pressing against it, testing it, sensing our fear, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Jason. My voice barely escaped, hoarse with terror. What the hell is it? Why is it still here? Why is it doing this? Jason looked at me, his expression hollow, his lips quivering as if he wanted to say something, but the words were stuck. And then, slowly, he turned away, not toward the door but toward the back of the diner, the kitchen. I couldn't see it at first, but when I followed his gaze, my blood ran cold. There, at the far end of the room, near the broken kitchen window, was a shadow. A shape, standing unnaturally still. It was just there. Waiting. The shadow was tall, its outline distorted, as though it didn't quite belong in the space it occupied. And yet, it felt like it was made from the very darkness itself, as if it was pulling the light from the room around it, becoming more and more solid with each passing second. I froze. I couldn't take my eyes off it. But then, the shape moved, gliding, shifting with a smoothness that made my skin crawl. My body screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I couldn't move. Get back, Jason hissed, pulling me toward the counter. He was shaking now, his breath quick and shallow. Get down, get down. But it was too late. The thing in the corner moved again, faster this time, and a sickening crack of something breaking echoed through the diner as its form stretched and distorted. It wasn't just a shadow, it was the darkness. It was alive, sentient, and it had been waiting for us. Run! Jason screamed, his voice barely breaking through the oppressive fear that gripped me. I didn't need to be told twice. I bolted, my feet carrying me toward the back exit. But the moment I reached the door, the lights above us flickered and went out, plunging us into pitch-black darkness. I felt something brush against my arm, cold, like ice, and the stench of rot filled the air, making me gag. A low hiss sounded in the dark, and I instinctively ducked, knowing what was coming next. It was here. I turned, but Jason was gone. There was no sound of him moving, no shuffling footsteps. He had vanished. The only thing left in the black void of the diner was the presence, pressing in from all sides, wrapping around me like a suffocating fog. Jason! I whispered hoarsely. Jason, where are you? No answer. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint sound of my own frantic breathing. And then, the whisper again, from right behind me. Don't you want to know? Don't you want to know what happened to your friends? The words crawled across my skin, sending tremors through me. The voice was familiar now, low, guttural, laced with something ancient and inhuman. It was speaking in a way that made it feel like it knew me, knew everything about me, about the people I had loved. I twisted around, my heart pounding in my chest, but there was no one there. No figure, no shape. Just darkness. The kind of darkness that doesn't let you breathe, and then, the growl. Louder now, closer. It was inside the diner with me, circling, closing in. I could hear its claws scraping along the floor, and with each step, the temperature dropped, frost forming on the edges of the walls, creeping toward me. I could feel it. I could feel it. I ran. I don't remember exactly how I made it out, but I remember the overwhelming terror that took over my mind. I don't know if it was my legs carrying me, or if the fear alone propelled me forward. My heart was a drumbeat in my chest, and I kept running, pushing through the door and into the street. When I stepped out into the open, I froze. Everything had changed, the town was gone. Not in the literal sense, the buildings were still there, the streets were still there, but it wasn't the hollow creek I remembered. The ground was covered in a thick layer of fog, swirling around like it had a life of its own. The air was heavy, pressing against me, suffocating, and then, in the distance, I saw it. A shadow moving toward me, faster now, like it was anticipating my every move. It wasn't just hunting me. It was feeding on me. The air outside had turned thick with fog, pressing against my lungs with a suffocating force. The shadows on the ground twisted like serpents, stretching toward me, as if the very earth itself was trying to claim me. Hollow Creek had never felt more like a tomb than it did now. I should have run. I should have kept running, but I was frozen, my mind screaming for action, but my body unable to comply. The presence behind me, the thing that had stalked me since the moment I stepped back into this cursed town, was gaining on me. I heard it before I saw it, that same guttural growl, closer this time. Closer than ever before. It was waiting for me. Watching me. The fog was too thick to see, but I could feel it moving around me, like it was wrapping its claws around my spine. My heart thundered in my chest, a deafening drumbeat that seemed to reverberate in the earth itself. I couldn't fight it anymore. I couldn't outrun it. Whatever it was, it knew me. It had known me from the moment I stepped foot back in Hollow Creek. It was drawn to me, just as it had been drawn to Jason, to the others, to the very town itself. I stumbled backward, my breath ragged and shallow. Jason! I muttered, as if speaking his name might pull him back into existence. But the truth hit me like a slap. Jason was gone. He had already been claimed. And I was next. Their voice came again, the one from the darkness. Why did you come back? It wasn't Jason's voice. It was low, thick with malice, and yet there was something twisted about it. It wasn't just speaking at me, it was speaking through me, pulling at something deep inside my soul. I spun around, desperate, my back now pressed against the old, cracked wall of the diner. I tried to push through the fog, but it closed in around me like an ocean, swallowing me whole. You shouldn't have returned, their voice said again. It wasn't the same voice from before. This one was older, ancient, primal, something that had been buried under Hollow Creek for centuries. You can't escape. Not from me. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The weight of the air around me felt unbearable. And then, the fog parted. For the first time, I saw it. It was taller than any man. Its form was fluid, shifting with the dark, like smoke given shape, yet with a cruel, sharp edge to it. Its eyes, if you could call them that, glowed an unnatural shade of red, and its mouth opened wide, revealing a row of jagged, rotting teeth. A low, almost playful chuckle escaped from it, like it was savoring my fear. You think you can escape me? You think you can run? You never really left. You never really understood, did you? It stepped closer, the ground beneath my feet vibrating with each movement, sending tremors through my legs. It didn't walk. It slithered. The way its form writhed and shifted made it impossible to look at for too long, and every time I blinked, it was closer, moving faster than I could comprehend. You don't remember, do you? I blinked, and when I opened my eyes again, the world around me shifted. The diner was gone. The streetlights, the old buildings, all disappeared, replaced by something worse. The fog had vanished, but in its place was the dark, endless woods surrounding me. I was back where it all began, the woods that lay just beyond the town's limits. Where it had first begun its hunt, the Hollow. That's what we used to call it. My memories, buried deep under years of denial, began to flood back, overwhelming me. The faces of the others, friends, classmates, all taken by it. The ones who'd vanished, who were never found, who were never mentioned again. We'd never questioned it, not really. Not until we were older, not until we started hearing the rumors, but by then, it was too late. I turned, my breath coming in desperate gasps, and saw the truth. The thing in front of me was not some creature from a nightmare. It wasn't some animal that had somehow slipped through the cracks of reality. No, it was far worse than that. It was a thing born of the land. Born of Hollow Creek, and it had always been there, lurking in the darkness, feeding off the fears of the people who lived here. It had fed off us, feeding off our terror, our confusion, our weakness. Every time someone disappeared, every time someone vanished without a trace, it grew stronger. It had grown into something far more powerful than we had ever realized. I could feel it pulling at me, drawing me into its grasp. The very earth beneath me seemed to soften, as if trying to swallow me whole. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't respond. You were always meant to be here, their voice said, the last words slithering across my skin like ice. I gave you a chance. A chance to escape. But you returned. And now, you're mine. I couldn't fight it. I couldn't move. The thing lunged forward, its mouth opening impossibly wide, and just as it reached me, I finally understood. It wasn't hunting me. It wasn't just hunting anyone. It was hunting Hollow Creek. And we, the people of this cursed town, had always been part of its design. In the end, I realized it wasn't just trying to feed on us. It was trying to consume the town itself, to claim it, to claim every last piece of it. And we, the living, were the last remnants it needed to finish its feast. The red glow of its eyes was all I could see. The last thing I felt was the cold, the suffocating darkness, and the faint whisper of the name I had feared for so long. Hollow.